Thanks very much, Dara, and thanks to the GeoDirectory team for the invite to speak to you all here today. Hopefully some of this is going to be very informative, very interesting for you to see. So Rob Powell is my name. I'm a station officer in Dublin Fire Brigade's Organisational Intelligence Unit. It's a relatively new addition to the brigade, probably just over 3 years in existence. I'm not a data professional nor a GIS professional. I'm somebody who comes from an operational background in Dublin Fire Brigade. I've moved around different functions and departments over that time, but I am somebody who's very, very passionate about the power of data, how we can use data, and how we can apply that in terms of spatial data and geographic information systems. So just give a little bit of background on Dublin Fire Brigade itself. Founded in 1862, so we've been around a good while now at this stage, near over 160 years. It's the largest full-time fire service in Ireland, and we serve all 4 Dublin local authorities. So that's Dublin City Council, South Dublin, Fingal, and Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown. Dublin Fire Brigade, unique in Ireland and probably a lot of Europe in that we provide a fully integrated fire and emergency ambulance service. So for the Dublin metropolitan area, we have that dual response of fire and ambulance. So all of our firefighters are trained paramedics as well. We cover an area roughly 922 square kilometres and covering a population of approximately 1.5 million people. We operate out of 14 stations, 12 of which are full-time and 2 of which are retained, which means they're on a pager per call-out basis. So organisation's roughly 1,000 personnel, and we're responding to approximately 120,000 fire and ambulance calls a year. I think we probably take more close in the region of 200,000 calls. We're probably responding to roughly about 40,000 fire calls and about 80,000 EMS calls across the Dublin area. So just to talk about our core functions, our emergency response. So very often people think about a fire service as just putting out fires. We have a variety of different services and training that we provide. We obviously have the fire service, the EMS. We provide a river rescue service on the Liffey. We have a high rope rescue team. We have hazmat teams. We provide marine emergency response for all of any offshore fires on boats in Irish waters. We also run the East Region Communications Centre, which handles all of the fire calls for all of Leinster, Cavan and Monaghan. So that's the whole East region of the country. All of those calls are being taken by Dublin Fire Brigade staff. We also have our fire prevention section that deal with licensing, fire certification, licensing and inspection regimes, and then also a lot of our community fire safety endeavours in terms of fire prevention efforts and school visits and educational programs and fire safety awareness. So there's quite a lot of different activities there above and beyond just providing that emergency response. So just talk a little bit about the data journey within Dublin Fire Brigade, and then I'm going to maybe just do a very brief case study on how we're using data, and specifically GeoDirectory data, given where we are today. And so essentially, legacy service for over 160 years, Dublin Fire Brigade has constantly had to evolve and improve its services to meet changing needs of the city, the built environment, and its inhabitants. So essentially, buildings are getting safer. They're being designed better. You know, they're also being designed taller. All of these new fire safety management systems, different designs, although they are safer, they require us to adapt our training, our equipment, and our approach to dealing with incidents in different types of buildings. Again, other things like we're responding to more weather events off the back of more severe weather events and climate change, and in addition to that, the likes of electric vehicles, and so there's lots of things. We're always having to change equipment, training, and our approach to adapt. And data is a tool like no other. So we need to really harness data and be able to use it effectively within the organisation. So there's been a growing awareness, probably over about the last 10 years within Dublin Fire Brigade, of how data can drive efficiency and public safety within the fire service and make us more efficient, and enable us to make better decisions and safer decisions, both for our responders and for the public for whom we serve. So in terms of the start point, that very often that's the most difficult part of the data journey, is where do we start? So Dublin Fire Brigade commissioned a data maturity assessment to inform us around where the gaps were in our data, where opportunities existed in terms of how we collect, store and share this information across the organisation. So that was the data maturity assessment was quite a sobering experience, as I'm sure anyone who has conducted one will attest. You know, some of the things that we found is, data quality was an issue, fragmented data, incomplete data, data silos, the existence of a lot of paper-based collection, data collection as well. So it shone a light on a lot of different areas of where we needed to improve. So basically that's all done now and we're all grand. It's a journey, but we've made small improvements and we're trying to improve certain areas of our data management and how we collect our data. So one of the foundations following on from the data maturity assessment was the establishment of the Organizational Intelligence Unit. So this was essentially to put a unit in place that we could centralize and champion data efforts across the organisation. So that was an important foundation, and like I said, that's been in place now for just over 3 years within Dublin Fire Brigade. So again, looking at the vision. So what was the vision? What did we want to achieve? So we wanted to move beyond just simple data collection and better use to share insights across the organisations. Like I said, there's multiple functions being provided there. There's different use cases for data. There's different people collecting data, storing data in different places. So it's trying to get that holistic view of the data that we hold, that we need, that we want to use. And that's been an important part of what the Organizational Intelligence Unit has been trying to achieve. So some of our key objectives, we want to obviously enhance responder safety, public protection, and we want to achieve overall organizational effectiveness and efficiency. One of those partnerships, obviously GeoDirectory being one, but we've partnered with Esri Ireland and Esri in general to leverage leading geospatial solutions and expertise to try and take a lot of everything we do has a location. So everything we do should have spatial data attached to it. We need somewhere to be able to consume and visualize that data so that we can make gain those efficiencies in looking at the data, but also making decisions. In terms of current progress, we've improved a lot of internal data collection. So we've migrated some of our data collection processes from paper into digital. And again, we're collecting that spatial data using some of the Esri products as well. So like I said, everything we're doing, it has a location and has a relevance, whether that be a local authority area, whether that be a station ground, whether that be a fire brigade district or whatever. It has relevance to the geography of the city. And we're also looking at, what external data, the world of data, what's out there, what can we use, what's available. GeoDirectory being one of those products that we've seen a huge amount of potential and huge use case for in the Forest Service. And again, that GIS and geospatial data for advanced visualization and analysis. So just, some of the data that's out there that we're using, like the CSO data gives us really good information about age profiles, presence of at a small area level, presence of disabilities. I think the last census collect people reporting whether they had a smoke alarm or not. So that's all really useful information. Utilities companies, obviously there's a lot there, particularly Uisce Éireann in terms of the hydrant locations and some of the attribute data that sits behind that spatial information regarding the hydrants in terms of the mains diameter will give us an indication of are we going to get a lot of water or a little bit of water out of this hydrant. So depending on how much we need and the scale of an incident, we can pull up a map and we can make an informed decision about what hydrant we want to use and where they're located. Things like the RTB, will tell us where typically rental properties have a higher instance of fire or a higher risk of fire. We're obviously using GeoDirectory, which I'll discuss in a little bit more detail afterwards. Pobble gives us our social deprivation index. Esri's Living Atlas, anyone who uses Esri, there's a massive amount of publicly available data and map layers that can be used for varying purposes. And obviously Tulge Éireann and the Prime 2 layer, which gives us the geometry essentially of a lot of the building footprints around the city. So just a brief case study for you in terms of building intelligence in the Forest Service. Okay, so understanding buildings is at the core of what we do, certainly from a risk management perspective and from a health and safety perspective. So if you take these buildings, for example, if you imagine there's an incident in one of these buildings, what do we need to know about that building? what can we obtain from simply pulling up outside on a fire engine? It's going to take us a bit of time to figure out, you know, how tall is that building? How many floors are in that building? What's that building used for? How many people might be in that building? You know, where are the hydrants around that building? What are the other exposures around that building where the fire might spread? So there's a huge amount of information that we want to collect, and typically we collect, you know, using boots on the ground, our own experience, our own intuition at incidents. But there's an opportunity there to be able to provide this information to drive preventative measures and preventative activities, but also to prevent that operational intelligence that when we do have an incident that we've quick and easy access to what that building is or what it's about. So under the Fire Services Act, Section 10.3, the Fire Brigade must have regard for the nature of fire hazards and the probable incidents and extent of fires in its functional area, the character of the area and the value of the property liable to be damaged. So that's enshrined in legislation, and that puts the responsibility on the fire service to have an understanding and appreciation of the risk essentially in their functional area. Okay, so how do we manage this obligation currently? Okay, there's obviously going to be those 9 known high-profile risk sites. You're going to have your pharmaceutical installations, your bulk fuel storage in Dublin Port Tunnel, hospitals, nursing homes, that sort of thing. Our inspections, so when we're out boots on the ground doing licensing inspections, we might come across fire safety issues or fire safety defects that we need to flag. And then, of course, there's a huge amount of local knowledge at a station level. You know, we'd have officers and firefighters that might be in a station for 20, 30 years. There's a huge amount of knowledge of their own risks in their area as well, okay? We can't see behind every door. We desperately want to see behind every door. That's what we want, okay? But, you know, it's just not possible, you know, resources. But data can provide a window. So it's looking at where we can get that information and where we can provide that window to give us that building and building risk intelligence that we so desperately need. So what can data tell us? Essentially, you know, at a building level, looking at GeoDirectory, you know, we can obtain the air code, which is going to give us the address. We've got the spatial data, we've got the XY or the lat long to give us the location. For those of you who aren't familiar with an ACE code is a 4-digit pan-European classification for a building activity. So what the NACE code allows us to do is to make some certain professional assumptions in evaluating the fire risk within a building. So what we've done is we've taken the NACE code, I think there's roughly just under 500 of them, 470 something, and we sat down for a day with fire prevention officers, operational officers, and the organisation intelligence unit, and we started to weight the business activity against certain risk metrics. So the occupancy type, okay? So if you take a retail outlet, okay, you can assume there's not going to be people sleeping. There's not going to be sleeping risk in a retail outlet, okay? People are generally going to be awake, and they're going to be either familiar or unfamiliar with their surroundings, okay? So that goes from awake and familiar. So people working in an office building, they know their surroundings, they're awake, they're familiar. Awake and unfamiliar might be a shopping centre or you know, a visitor into another building. Sleeping and familiar, somebody in a multi-occupancy residential building, or sleeping and unfamiliar, which might be somebody sleeping in a hotel. So there is that enhanced risk for us. So we can start to categorise based on the NACE code. Occupancy type, is there likely to be hazardous activities? Okay, so based on the business activity, we can make a fairly informed decision as whether there's going to be hazardous activities in that building. What's the fire load going to be like? You know, if it's a carpet warehouse, that's going to have a high fire load. If it's a bulk fuel storage, that's going to have a high fire load. It's also going to have a fire growth rate. That fire is going to spread quickly throughout that site or that building. Is there likely to be vulnerable persons there? Okay, so primary school, absolutely. Nursing home, absolutely. Hospital, absolutely. So very quickly you can go down through this list using the NACE code keys, and you can start to make some assumptions about that building. The GeoBuilding Intel is giving us height data on a large amount of buildings around the city, number of floors, the floor area. The floor area tells us, you know, how complex this building is likely to be. The building height is really relevant in the number of floors because that tells us about, you know, how the building is going to evacuate, how long it might take to evacuate, what equipment we need to bring. Okay, so buildings over 18 metres we treat as tall and complex. We have special procedures, special equipment, and a special approach to those buildings. So that's why that's really important. Again, the occupancy, you know, Is there 5 people? Is there 500? Is there 5,000 in that building? What was the build year? This is becoming particularly important in light of the government redress scheme. So buildings built between, I think, 1993 and 2014 fall in under this building remediation scheme. So there's an assumption being made there that buildings built in this window have, building defects, fire safety defects, and presence of water ingress and issues. So what we're able to do is, as the government is getting around and assessing all of these buildings under the building remediation scheme, we can start to collect the information to understand what the issue is with the building. We can communicate that to crews. But in the absence of us visiting the building, the build year can give us something that we can index, put a level of index of suspicion against the building that there may be a defect there and there may be something that we need to consider. And that might prompt another process, whether that be an inspection or what we call a pre-incident plan to gather operational intelligence on that building. Estimated rebuild cost, again, in turn, one of the things we have to do is we have to understand the value of the property in our area. And again, if we have an incident, an important metric for the fire service to report on is the value of property saved. So there's loads of information there. The building geometry we're obviously taking from the Tailshare and Prime 2 there. Okay, so visualizing that data. And again, we're just looking at a building level. What we're doing here, this is an Esri dashboard that we've put together. Sorry, I should have mentioned, under the Fire Services Act, we're responsible for all buildings in our functional area, excluding single occupancy dwellings. So your personal home or your house that's single occupancy doesn't fall under the Fire Services responsibility under the Act. So we don't have powers of inspection, or we can't enter your home to look around. If it's an apartment building that's multiple occupancy, or it's a mixed use building or a commercial building, absolutely, yeah, we have a responsibility under the legislation. So what we're doing here is we're taking information from GeoBuilding Intel, we're taking information from GeoDirectory and a couple of other data sources. And we have an FME process running in the background, basically giving weightings to those variables that I discussed on the other slide. And we're now able to visualize that in a GIS product or a map-based product. And this sort of product can drive a variety of different processes in the Forest Service. So when we start to look at this, we can start to sieve the buildings down and give them a priority level. So that can drive other processes like our site familiarization. So we might send a crew out to become more familiar with a building or several buildings or a site. We might decide we want to gather more information and do a full pre-incident plan on that building, or it might drive an inspection regime for our fire prevention sections. Again, it's just to show you the power of curating this data and being able to join it together and visualize it. That's just a kind of an experimental project we were doing using Cesium as a 3D platform. We're doing some work around digital twins and how the fire brigade can utilize digital twins to enhance our response. So that's the same data set, just draped over a 3D scene. So very quickly, the 3D gives you an awful lot more context to the data that you're visualizing. You can start to see the road network and access and egress into buildings. You can see, its proximity to the wider geography of the city. So, looking at data, tabulated data, to visualizing that data in a 2D GIS, to visualizing that data in a 3D scene, it just shows you the power of what the potential is there. And certainly from a Forest Service perspective, I would see a lot of this, utilizing data and harnessing data to provide this sort of intelligence as pretty transformational from a Forest Service perspective. We've not really done anything like this up to the last kind of 2 to 3 years. And, there's a huge amount of potential there for how we're going to consume data, collect data, visualize the data. So that concludes the presentation. Now we're going to do a question panel afterwards. So I'll be happy to take any questions anybody has. But thank you all very much.